What's up, guys? This is James from the Timur podcast, and today I've got another faction overview for the mod Tsardoms Total War 1448 Fall of Constantinople for the game Medieval to Total War. So if you're new to this series, what I'm basically doing is I love this game and I love this mod for this game so much that I wanted to draw any attention to it that I could. And one of the ways I do that is I take a look at all the different factions that are playable. I know when I'm looking at a new mod for Medieval 2, the first thing I do is I want to know the campaign map, I want to know when it takes place, and I want to know who I can play as. So, today we are looking at one of the Islamic factions, the Beylik of Candar. So this is a pretty interesting faction and a pretty difficult campaign, I would say. So right off the bat, let's take a look. So the year is 1448, as always. You start with 3 settlements. You are Islamic, you have no allies, and you are at war with the Ottomans, which is not what you want to hear. That's not a good sign. And if we look at the campaign map, there we go, you are wedged over here in kind of northeastern Anatolia, the very border of the playable campaign map. And if we look at your enemies, the Ottoman Turks, they are right next to you, and you're in a very difficult position. So we'll look more at that when we get to the campaign map. As for historical background, I will kind of scroll through this in case you want to read. But basically, you are a small Turkic beylik that has somehow retained its independence. Well, I shouldn't say somehow. You've had a legacy of very good rulers who have kept you out of trouble and managed to build up the Beylik of Candar. And you've also done a pretty good job of, they have done a pretty good job of making the right alliances and the right enemies. Obviously, the biggest threat to the Beylik is the Ottomans, and historically, the Ottomans did eventually take over the Beylik. Actually, I think it was in 1461, so not too long after where this game starts. But prior to 1448, the Beylik had managed to stay independent a lot of the time by allying with either the Ottomans in an effort to appease them, or the enemies of the Ottomans. Most recently, this was Amir Timur of the Timurid Empire, who came and defeated the Ottomans at the Battle of Ankara, and threw the Ottomans into a period of basically just total chaos, which meant that you, as the Beylik, I said you again. Okay, well, you're playing as them. You understand what I mean. It means that the Beylik was able to reestablish itself as an independent kingdom, and this was about 1404, so 40 years or so earlier, and now Timur is gone. He is dead. His empire is nowhere near you. It has receded back into Central Asia. And speaking of Timur, if that is someone who interests you, I have a podcast, the Timur Podcast, that covers the life, conquests, character, and legacy of Amir Timur, and details for that can be found in the description below. But anyway, back to the Beylik of Candar. Basically, now the bill is due, and you are at war with the Ottomans. They want your land, and things are not looking good. So, for the short game, or long game, you need to hold 30 regions, which actually is not that many, but you only start with 3, so you're not a powerful faction to begin with, so that might be a little tricky. And you have to control all of these settlements, which, as you can imagine, are all here in kind of central Anatolia. And for the short campaign, it's the same thing, except you have to hold 15 regions and eliminate the Knights of St. John. And I've covered them before, but if we look at them, they're down here, based in the island of Rhodes, with a few forts in southwestern Anatolia. So that is that. For your strengths, a large number of quality foot and horse archers, good cavalry options. Yep, that's very true. And weaknesses, lack of heavy infantry, Yeah, that's fairly true. Limited roster, sure, and lacks strong late period units. That's definitely true, especially in comparison to the Ottomans. The Ottomans have better units than you in every regard. Better horse archers, better heavy cavalry, better infantry, better skirmishers, better everything. And they start with 33 settlements. So they are bigger and better than you. And you have to decide. The big question is, do you appease the Ottomans? Do you ally with them? Or do you fight them to your last dying breath? And we'll talk about that more in a second. But for now, let's jump on over to the campaign map. Alright, so here we are on the campaign map, and this is the welcome script that you get at the beginning of the game with, again, more historical background and a little overview on your neighbors and whatnot, so I will scroll through that in case you want to read it, but it's a lot of what we talked about before. So, this is where you are, and you can see that your capital city is literally on the edge of the map. My camera doesn't even I can't even center the city. That's how close to the edge you are. So, as you can imagine, expansion, already half of your expansion opportunities are cut off because this is where you are. So, you start with 3 settlements and you are wedged over here. You got the Black Sea to your north and Anatolia to your south. Let's take a look at your cities. Starting off in Sinope, your capital city, and it starts off as a fortress. You've got a pretty good stack. Actually, I would say a very good half stack army. You've got some good heavy infantry, decent spears, good archers, some Nafatoon, which are a nice wild card unit, some good horse archers, and an excellent general. So your faction leader, Ismail Bey, he is an excellent general, and you'll see this with my own campaign later, but I basically used my faction leader here because he's young enough. I used him as my main military commander, and he became an excellent commander. So he starts off with some really nice traits, and I would definitely use him in battle. So as for recruitment options here in Sinope, you have a few good units you can get right from the beginning of the game. We will look more at these guys later. You can also train princesses here, which is nice. And as for construction, it's got a decent amount of population. You have some pretty good access to buildings right off the bat. And you also have the Sinope Fortress here, which gives you access to training the princess, which I just mentioned, as well as the Beylik of Candar Lancers, which is kind of your special unit, if you will. You can train them here. And a few other cities as well, I believe, but they are a pretty limited area of recruitment unit. But they're just an excellent heavy cavalry unit, and again, we'll look more at them later. And then the fortress also gives you some nice health and law bonuses. So that is your capital city. Pretty nice. It's... The main drawback is it's just right here on the edge of the map, so it's a little far from everything, but other than that, it is a good city to hold. To the south, you have a city, which is, I want to say, a small city. It's got about over 10,000 people, and it's a decent city. I can't complain about this one. Once you build it up with some ports and roads and mines, you can make quite a bit of money here. You start off with a pretty decent general, but he's also pretty good at running the city. He's administratively minded. And if I haven't explained this before, basically with generals in this game, they go one of two ways. They are either administratively minded or, as this guy is, militarily minded. And what this means is, as it says, they're able to gain more from that tree of traits, basically. So if they are military minded, they will generally be a better commander, and if they are administratively minded, they're generally better at running cities. Now, that doesn't mean they can't wear both shoes. As you can see, this guy has 5 stars of command. He's a pretty decent general, but this just means it's easier for him to become a better administrator than commander. So again, just another reason why I love this mod is you really do have to look at the traits of your different generals, and while some people might think that's kind of boring, I love it. I really grow attached to these fictional video game characters, and I remember each one of them. Wow, it's been a long day. I remember them in my campaigns. Anyway, let's look at this city. You've got some nice buildings here. You do have to build it up. You don't even have a port at the beginning of the game, so that would probably be one of my first priorities. But as you can also train some good units here, some good cavalry, decent archers, and then some, militia units and whatnot. And you start with some spearmen, some horsemen, and some half-decent archers. And that is probably your biggest strength as the Candarids is you're kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. If you played a lot of Medieval 2 mods, this is your typical Islamic styled roster. We'll take a closer look at that later. But going on to your last settlement down here, Candarid, it's a pretty small settlement, only 2,000 people. Very bare bones. It's going to take a while to build up, and you have a couple just garbage axemen. I shouldn't say garbage, they do have a purpose, but some bowmen as well. So that's it. You don't start off with much, and the Ottomans are going to be coming right away. You have a small fort over here, and then as far as agents, you have a spy, a diplomat, a imam, and an assassin. And one thing I will note is you can call jihads as the Islamic faction, but you need to have 5 of these little piety tokens. And your dude here only starts with 3. So right away, I would move him over to areas that are not heavily Islamic so that he can start telling the Islamic faith to non-believers and building up his piety, because the jihad is so powerful. It's kind of overpowered in this game and in this mod, and I would definitely use it as soon as you get access to it. Other than that, a few things I want to mention is that you have access to building the Ahi Brotherhood Guild. And what this is basically, it's a Turkic guild that was formed in the 13th century, I believe, basically to counter a lot of the European guilds. And I believe it was started by a leather worker, but it kind of grew to encompass a whole bunch of other trades. And this building just gives you some nice benefits: population growth bonus, increase in tradable goods, and you are also able to recruit some, I would say, mediocre swordsmen. They're okay. It says superior. Yeah, maybe they're better than mediocre. I'm just a little harsh on them because they don't have any armor. But again, we'll look at these guys later. So you do have access to that building, which you can build in any Anatolian settlement, which is nice. Just gives you a little bit of a bonus. And then, shoot, there was something else I was going to say. I can't remember, so hopefully I'll remember. But let's take a look at kind of where you start. So like it said, diplomacy, you have no allies, no vassals, and your enemies are the Ottomans. And being an Islamic power, a lot of people hate you. Even a lot of your fellow Muslims hate you. The Ottomans hate you. Your neighbors to the south, the Candarid's, they don't really care for you. And needless to say, the Christian factions tend to not really care for you as well. The only positive relations you have is really to your north. Let's just toggle off the fog of war. The Crimean Khanate, also another Muslim power, they like you quite a bit. So that's definitely a possible alliance up here to the north across the Black Sea. And yeah, I would say that could be a good idea. But the other thing you have to worry about is the Crimean Peninsula is probably one of the best places for you to expand to, and that means you will inevitably run into the Crimean Khanate. So maybe you don't want to form an alliance with them. I don't know. It's kind of depending on how you want to play. Now, let's look at your starting position. So the Ottoman Turks are pretty much your neighbors in all ways, and they have some pretty big armies right on your borders at the beginning of the game. And I've played as the Candarids twice, and both times the Ottomans took a few turns to attack me, but by turn 5 or 6, they were laying siege to my cities. So be ready to fight right from the get-go, unless you want to appease the Ottomans, which I'll talk about in a minute. As for your other neighbors, the Genoese are also your immediate neighbors. They have a little fortress here at Amastri, which it has a few units, but that might be a first good target, because it's pretty ill defended and you have some pretty good units right from the get-go. Otherwise, the Genoese could be a good ally against the Ottomans. Unfortunately, you don't have the best relations with the Genoese, just because of prior history. If we look, yeah, poor relations. But at the end of the day, everybody's worried about the Ottomans, so they could be a good ally. And then, as far as to the south, down here, we have the Candarid, and they're another Islamic power which is very worried about the growing Ottoman Empire. They too don't start very strong. I would say they're definitely stronger than you, though. They have 4 settlements as opposed to your 3, and they start off with quite a few more units. So there is an Ottoman, oh man, another full stack Ottoman army. You do have the Ottoman buffer between you and the Candarid, but I would say either you want to ally with them against the Ottomans or ally with the Ottomans against the Candarid. That is what I did, but we'll see that later. Then that's really it in Anatolia. So you would have to cross the Black Sea up here to the Crimean Peninsula to meet your other neighbors. And like I said, you have the Crimean Khanate up here. Not too powerful at the beginning of the game, but there are some scripts later that give the Crimean Khanate a huge boost. So do watch out for that if you expand up here. They do become a more powerful faction later on in the game. The only rebel settlement near you is Theodoro, which is the Principality of Theodoro, kind of a remnant of the Byzantine Empire and Empire of Trebizond, which is off the map. But it is a Greek Orthodox principality here, and it has got almost a full stack garrison, so that's going to be a hard fight to take this city. And despite having some mines, it's not the best city. It's certainly valuable, but there are better cities to take. One of those being Kaffa. Kaffa is a very valuable city, so I would suggest taking out the Genoese, taking up their colonies one by one. They can be a little hard to take, but at the end of the day, these are just colonies. This is not the main Genoese force, and they are isolated. You can easily cut them up and snatch them up before reinforcements arrive. So that is what I would recommend. Beyond that, that's pretty much it. You do have the Byzantines over here as your neighbors, but that could be a strategy. Just go right for Constantinople. Could be a strategy. And then up here, the Hungarians and the Moldovans are up here, also on the Black Sea. So technically, I guess they are your neighbors as well. But that's it. But I remembered the thing I forgot about earlier, and that is you are one of the very few factions who has access to merchants. So the way this mod works is really only the Italian factions can train merchants, and not every Italian faction can train them as well. So merchants are really powerful in this game. Well, not this game, but in this mod they are powerful. And being that you are a seafaring people that has a history of trade, you do have access to the merchants. And I would train them as often and as much as you can. There's some carpets down here that give you some nice trade bonuses, and they're very close to your homeland, which is nice. You can get down there quickly. And then, of course, there's gold in a few places, especially over here in Serbia. There's some good places, which would give you lots of cash. And then up here, if you throw your morality aside, you could get involved in the slave trade. There's a few slave resources that can give you a lot of money. So that's a really nice aspect to the Candarids. And the other thing I would say about the Candarids that sets them apart is they are a quote-unquote seafaring people, which means with the right script enabled, you have the opportunity to accept it or deny it. It shows up on turn 2, so I don't have it here. But there is a raiding script, which means that any port that is blocked gives a small percentage of money to be stolen from the blocked faction and given to the faction that is blockading the port. It's a small percentage, but some nations, some factions, get a larger percentage because they are seafaring peoples, and you are one of them. So if you enable that script, which you should probably do because money is tough to come by as the Candarids, I would suggest building up a navy and blockading as many ports as possible of your enemies, because that is going to give you a nice little bonus into your economy. It won't be able to supplement your economy or replace it, but it will give a little bit of a bonus. So that's about it. Let's see, we talked about, all that. Honestly, it all comes down to this. What are you going to do with the Ottomans? Are you going to fight them like history played out, or are you going to appease them? This is what I would say. One of the problems with this mod that I have, and it's very nitpicky, and it also makes the game better, so it's not really a problem, but the Ottomans are a bit of a glass cannon. And that is to say that because they start with so many regions and are so powerful, the AI thinks that they're just despicable. And if you offer them anything, you're doing them the favor because of how despicable they are. That's just how Medieval 2 works. And unfortunately, the modders can't really do anything about that. But what that means is that even though I am at war with the Ottomans, and they are vastly superior to me, and they could easily wipe me out. I mean, with this army, and this army right here, and the garrison of Angora, they could wipe me out. So even though that's the case, if I send my diplomat over to them, and I offer a ceasefire, they view that as very generous, because they're the despicable ones, and I am, lowering myself from the clouds to offer them this. And even with that, I can say, you know what, give me $8,000. And they'll probably still view that as generous. So I will offer that, they accept it. Look, I just got all that. And then to take this a step further, why don't I ally with them? Yes, they view it as very generous. And now I am allied to the Ottomans, and the initial threat is gone. So it is a little cheesy just because that's not historical, it's not realistic, but at the same time it makes for a much easier campaign, and I would say a more enjoyable campaign, but that is entirely up to you. So with that, it really just depends. Are you going to join the Ottomans or fight them? That's really your first question. So with that, let's jump into the roster of the Candarids. Welcome to the battle map for the roster of the Candarids, and looking through the roster again, I would say that overall the Candarids are a very strong faction. You've kind of got all your bases covered. You've got great defensive units, great spearmen, great attack infantry, great infantry that is effective against armor. You've got excellent missile units, especially archers, but you also have you also have crossbowmen, which are okay. You've got javelin men, you've got okay gun units, Nafatoon, and then with cavalry, you've got really good cavalry too. So really the biggest weakness, I would say, is you don't have any polearm infantry. You're going to have to rely entirely on mercenaries or area of recruitment units for those guys. But other than that, you've got all your bases covered. The weakness, though, is that all of your neighbors also have their bases covered, and they are more powerful than you, especially the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans are just so strong in this mod, and their units are so good that they outclass you pretty much on everything. But with that, let's get into the units. So starting off, you have the Yaya Spearmen, which are just your basic militia spear and shield unit. They are garbage. They are peasant militia who are given a spear and a shield and thrust into battle with no training, no will to fight, really. They have poor morale. Well, it doesn't say poor morale, but they do. They will rout fairly easily. But all of that is to be expected because these are cheap spearmen to throw into the battle as cannon fodder or to kind of hold the peace as garrison units in settlements because they do get free upkeep. They are only recruitable in Anatolian regions. I think any faction can train them once they control settlements in Anatolia, but I'd have to double check that. Basically, bonus fighting cavalry, yes, they do have a spear, but attack of 1 is terrible, charge bonus of 2 is not great, and total defense of 7 is really bad, especially since none of that is armor. It's just the shield and then a little bit of defense skill. But, I mean, I shouldn't hate on these guys too much because that is what they are. They are malicious spearmen, and if you expect anything more of them, you will be disappointed. So let's move on to more professional spearmen, and right away you can see the difference. These guys are soldiers. They're professional soldiers. They have the armor. They have some training. They look fantastic. I really enjoy the colors of the Candarids. The red and the white just kind of pop. I love it. And so let's look at them, the Port Guard Spearmen. And as the name implies, you are a seafaring people, and these are the men who are positioned to protect those ports. But you're going to use them in pretty much all of your battles. So quality average, I would agree. They're just kind of average spearmen, but really the first line infantry you're gonna have access to. They can form the Schiltrum, they have a bonus fighting cavalry, of course, and they have good morale. So they'll at least hold the line a little longer than any militia soldiers. You can train them pretty easily anywhere that has the appropriate barracks. And for their stats, attack of 3, charge bonus of 3, defense skill 13, and you can see how that is broken down. And I quite like these guys. I really enjoy their design. I think their design is excellent, and I like them because they're cheap and they'll hold the line for at least a little while my cavalry can flank the enemy and while my missile units can rain hell upon the enemy. These guys they'll do a decent job at what they're supposed to. They're not going to get any kills unless the cavalry attacks, but they will hold the line. Next up is one of those units I talked about earlier, and that is the Ahi Brotherhood Warriors. So these are the guys you can train from the Ahi Brotherhood Guild buildings. And they're good sword and board units. They have no armor, so any sort of missile fire will destroy them, especially since their shield only offers them a 4 defense. But once in the melee, they'll actually do pretty well because that's when the defense skill comes in. So they have a defense of 12, and then an attack of 7 is actually pretty high for sword units. Usually a 5 or a 6 is kind of normal. So the 7 is quite nice. Excellent morale, yes, they are. It says they're a religious order. I guess so. You could say that, but they will not break easily, and they also have good stamina. Anytime a unit has good stamina in this mod, that's kind of rare, so it's nice. They will fight longer than most other units. They may charge without orders, but I think I've said this before. That really hasn't caused any issues with me with Medieval 2. I don't know how that's programmed, but not too bad. But yes, they are only recruitable in Anatolian regions, like I said earlier when talking about the guild. But they're just a solid sword infantry unit. I'd be careful with them just because of that lack of armor. But if you're in a pinch, I would train a few of these guys to defend a city in a heartbeat because they will do a good job at holding the walls, at pushing the enemies back. So I do like these guys. I wish they had armor, but what can you do? They're guilds men. They're not as really essentially professional soldiers. So moving on to one of my favorite units for the Candarids, and that is the Candarid Marines. First of all, look at that armor. Look at the design. They look awesome. And I love these curved sabers they get. So these are the Marines. You are a seafaring faction, I will say for the 20th time, and these are the guys who are fighting on the boats and doing all sorts of assaults and whatnot on your ships. So they are the Marines, and it might be it says they're average here. I would disagree. I would say they're above average, and well, okay, first let's just look at the stats. Good morale, good stamina. That's solid. A little bit above average, not amazing. They don't have excellent morale like we saw with these guys, but still good morale. I will gladly take it. An attack of 5, yeah, that's pretty normal for swordsmen. So the 7 for these dudes, it's a lot higher. 5 is average, I would say. Charge bonus of 3 is okay. Total defense of 18, that's actually pretty high, I would say, for a Marine unit. 18 defense, 10 of that being armor. I mean, yeah, look at them. Their armor is... It's good. So defense skill of 4, that's a little low. I'd like to see that higher, but whatever. Shield of 4, that's good. So why do I like these guys? They look like a pretty average sword unit. I like these guys because they are very cheap to recruit. It doesn't say here, but they are very cheap to maintain, and they are very easy to get a hold of. So they come from your port buildings. They are recruitable in any coastal regions once you've built up your ports. And what that means is they're actually fairly easy to access anywhere, even away from your homelands. So let's say you expand across the Black Sea into Moldavia, you can train these guys pretty quickly. And because they're so cheap, you don't have to feel guilty about it. You can throw a few of these guys into your armies and they won't drain your financial reserves. And because of that, because the fact that they've got very decent and respectable stats, I love these guys. And in my campaign later, you will see that in my armies, I have a few of these units. So, okay, enough of that. Let's get on to your elite infantry units. And beginning with your Turpanlu Guardsmen, and they are just a great shock infantry unit meant to break the lines and destroy enemy cavalry. And you can see they're looking great with some really nasty looking halberds. So let's look at their stats. Bonus fighting cavalry, definitely you would expect that with these giant axes. Effective against armor, awesome. Excellent morale, very nice. I do wish they had better stamina, but I will gladly take any of that. Attack of 8 is pretty good. Charge bonus of 5 is very good for infantry. And if you add that together, plus the bonus against cavalry and armor, their charge is devastating. And on top of that, they have pretty good defense too. 11 armor, 6 defense skill means that they'll stay alive for quite a while. These are your best shock infantry meant to break the enemy lines, and they do a pretty good job at it. And they're not too expensive either, I would say. They're a little pricier than some of your other infantry, but well worth the price, because anything that's effective against armor is valuable in this mod. There are some units that have insane amounts of armor, so if you can ignore half of that with your attacks, which is what effective against armor means, they are worth it. So yeah, I do enjoy recruiting these guys. Next up, we have your assault infantry. So another assault infantry. They don't have a weapon that's effective against armor, and they have a charge bonus that's a little less, but they are still amazing. And I'm a big fan of these guys. You start off with one of these units, and it takes a while before you can train more of them, unless you take better citadels or fortresses. So that is one thing to be wary of with the Candarids, is you're not going to have access to your elite units right away. And that does hurt. But these guys, you do start off with one of these units, and they are awesome. I really love these guys. They are a sword and shield unit. They are elite. Good stamina, excellent morale, inspires nearby troops, is awesome, and an attack of 9, which if we look at our other sword units, remember when I said 7 was really good? Well, these guys have an attack of 9. That is exceptional for swordsmen. Charge bonus of 4 is very respectable. Total defense of 24 is great. So these guys, as pictured here in this little image, they are your wall takers. They're going to be doing a lot of your siege battles and defense battles, and they look great while doing so. So anytime you can train these guys, once you can, definitely consider doing so. And then finally, you do get one more elite infantry unit, and that is your elite spearmen. Your Foot Ascari. Foot is... that's a weird way to say it, but Foot Ascari, there we go. And they're just a great spear unit. They're not the best in the mod, but they are very good. Superior, yes, I would agree with that. They can form the Schildtrum, bonus fighting cavalry, excellent morale, all of that is great. A 4 attack for a spear is actually, it's halfway decent. And then a charge bonus of 4 is very good, which means if you charge these guys in, an attack of 8 is not bad at all for someone with a spear. Total defense of 18 means these guys will survive for quite a while, and they're just better than your port guard spearmen in every way. A little more expensive, sure, but well worth the price. The one thing I would say is I believe for both of these units, and possibly even these guys, it takes 2 or 3 turns to recruit them. So not only do you have to find somewhere where they can be recruited because it takes a high level barracks, but it also takes a little bit of time to recruit them, which it's pretty normal for this mod, but that is something to just be wary of. And the only other thing I would say about these guys is that there's 200 of them in a unit, which is more than any other unit we've looked at before. It's more men than other units. I do realize that it kind of depends on what mode you're playing on for how many men per faction. I believe I'm playing on very large unit sizes. That's what I prefer, but other than that, yeah, a great unit. Let's move on. So getting to the way I split this up is I kind of have your core Candarid infantry here. Now we're going to talk about your core missile units, and then we'll talk about more regional and mercenary units. So starting with your core units, you have these Javelineers, and they're just a javelin unit, poor morale, good stamina, they're peasants, but the fact that they throw javelins means that they are valuable. Also, their recruitment cost of 180, they don't cost anything, and I don't remember what their upkeep cost is, but it's gotta be pennies. So definitely worth it to just have a few of these guys lying around in some of your border towns, maybe, just to offer support, because a javelin attack of 9 is devastating. It doesn't matter what the enemy is, whether or not you're fighting peasants or professional troops, people with armor or no armor, a 9 missile attack is definitely going to get you kills. And then on top of that, a 2 melee attack and a 7 defense means that you can throw them in. I would not recommend it, but you could throw them in as maybe a support unit if you have to. But what you're recruiting them for is definitely these javelins. And I really enjoy their design as well. I like these long tunics they have. They look great. So next up, we have an interesting unit, and that is you have access to the Azab crossbowmen, which normally with Muslim factions, you have better archers, and you don't typically have access to crossbows. That was more of a European stylized way of warfare, but here you go. You have access to some crossbowmen, and looking at their stats, it's nothing too great. Average quality, total defense of 9 is pretty low. It means they will be shot up pretty easily, and a melee attack of 2 is terrible. But they have long-range missiles, good stamina, and a missile attack of 9, which means that they can shoot the enemy from afar, and they're pretty cheap as well, 480 recruitment cost. So just that alone means they're valuable. I wouldn't use these guys as my main missiles in my army, but as 1 or 2 of these units to kind of support, I would definitely do that, especially if I was tight with money, because that long-range 9 missile is valuable. But what I would much rather do with my armies while playing as the Candarids is focus on archers, and you have some excellent archers. So first of all, just look at the design of these units. They look fantastic. I really love the mail on their faces, covering everything but their eyes on a few of these dudes. Looks great. And if we scroll around, their shields are awesome too. I love this unit, and they are excellent archers, the no-care archers. Long-range missiles, yes, love that. Good morale, rare for archers, and very valuable. Good stamina, love that. Missile attack of 5 is good. Melee attack of 4 is okay. And total defense of 17 is actually pretty darn good for archer units. So, yeah, you can recruit these guys in Anatolia or on the steppe. And I would recruit these guys whenever you can. For their stats, they're very cheap, and they will rack up the kills because of their long-range missiles. So I love that. And then you also have access to another, I would say, elite unit, although you can kind of recruit them in any archery range that is built up enough. Never mind, I take that back. They're only recruitable in regional capitals, so ignore what I just said. This is one of your elite units, and that is the Candarid Guard Archers. They're just an amazing archer unit. Inspires nearby troops. They can lay sharpened stakes, and as I've said many times before, any unit that can lay stakes is valuable because they're so overpowered. Excellent morale, good stamina, long-range missiles. A melee attack of 2 is actually terrible, but I believe that's a mace, so at least you get the armor-piercing bonus with that. A missile attack of 7, though, is very good, especially for bows and arrows. Total defense of 20, excellent. Armor 12, very good. Defense skill of 4 and shield of 4, those are fine. But this is just an elite archer unit. They're not the best archer unit in the game by any means. They are very expensive. They're hard to get a hold of, and I believe it takes like 6 turns to recruit them or something like that, 4 or 5. It takes a long time to recruit them. So you're only going to have a few of these units in your campaign, but you do start with one of them, which is very nice. So if you decide to fight the Ottomans and the Ottomans attack your city, use these guys, lay the stakes right at the gateway, and laugh as all of the Ottoman cavalry die. And that's a little strategy you can exploit. So that's it for archers, at least for your main core. You do have access to a lot of other archers, which we'll get to later. But you also have some good gunner units. And these guys they're a halfway decent gun unit. They do have some weaknesses. If we look, they have a total defense of 8, and only 2 of that is armor. So they're not wearing much armor, meaning any type of missile will wipe them out, even if it's kind of low tier archers. They can still devastate these guys. But they have good morale, which is nice. They're not too expensive. I think they take 2 turns to recruit, which is pretty normal for gun units. Missile attack of 26, though. That is why we train them, because that is very, very powerful, meaning these guys can take on any sort of enemy, regardless of armor. 26 is going to give you kills. Plus, it's a gun unit, which means it scares the enemy, and because of those 2 factors, they're very valuable. So that's pretty much all I have to say about them. And then we get to one of the most interesting units in the game, and these guys go back to the base game of Medieval 2, and that is the Nafatun. So if you are unfamiliar with the Nafatun, I have a love-hate relationship with these guys. I love them because when they work, they are probably one of the most powerful units in the game. The thing is, sometimes they just decide not to work, and I don't know why. I think it's the original programming with Medieval 2, but sometimes these guys are so resistant to just throw their missiles at the enemy, and they will just stand there and be killed, and it annoys me. So when this unit works, and it usually does work, they are devastating. So if you're unfamiliar, what they do is they throw this little pot of naphtha, which is basically an inferno device that it kind of works like a hand grenade in a way. It causes the enemy to just instantly be engulfed in flames. It's pretty much a one-shot, one-kill, regardless of the enemy's defensive measures, and it instills terror in the enemy. The only downsides are they only have a few of them, and they don't have a long range as they are throwing these items, but they can wipe out. You can get kill counts in the triple digits with these guys on battles. They can just annihilate the enemy, and I recruit them whenever I can, despite the fact that sometimes they don't work. So if we look at their stats, effective against armor, yeah, it's a bomb. I would say that is effective against armor. Frighten nearby enemy, yeah, I would be frightened as well. They're a little expensive to train. They're not too expensive to maintain. I guess they are for only getting 40 soldiers, but well worth any cost. Melee attack of 4, missile attack of 15. That might not seem too high, but it is extremely powerful the way these bombs work in the coding. The other downside I would say with the Nafatun is they only have a defense of 8, and only 2 of that is armor, meaning if I'm fighting an enemy that has Nafatun, I'm focusing all of my fire on them because I fear these guys, and any sort of arrow fire will devastate them. So watch out for that. There are some European factions that get a similar unit that have much higher armor, the Petiardier or something like that. I think we covered them when we took a look at the Ragusan roster. So they have more armor, much better unit, I would say. But the Nafatoon are definitely great. It says they're average. No, they're exceptional. They're a wild card unit. They will change the course of battles and the course of your campaign if you use them the right way, and if they decide to fight the right way. I'll say that. So that's kind of it for your core missile units. Now let's look at more regional units, some mercenary units that you have access to. So we saw in the campaign you start with a few units of these guys, Turkmen, Axemen. Yeah, I said they weren't great. They serve a purpose, and that is they're a very, very cheap unit that's effective against armor. And they have good stamina as a little cherry on top. So they are militia, they get free upkeep in the right settlements, which I believe, yeah, they have to be Anatolian regions. And I also believe that any faction can recruit these guys. You just start in Anatolia, so it makes sense that you start with a few of these units. An attack of 2 is bad, but it is effective against armor, so they can get a few kills here and there, which is nice. Charge bonus of 1 is terrible. Total defense of 7 is also terrible, so they will die very easily. They're a bad militia unit, like all militia units, or I should say peasant militia units, but that little effective against armor does give them a nice little bonus. So if I had to choose between Yaya Spearmen and Turkmen Axemen, it would kind of it would depend on who I was afraid of. If I was afraid of cavalry, get more Spearmen. If I'm afraid of infantry, get more Axemen. It's just kind of the classic rock, paper, scissors of Medieval 2 Total War. The other nice thing is they're dirt cheap, so you don't have to feel bad about recruiting these guys. Next up, we get to kind of a similar unit, and that is the Martolos Axemen, which are Europeans, Balkan individuals, a lot of Christians who were fighting for the Ottomans. It says they're recruitable in Western Anatolian regions. Yes, they're recruitable there. I believe you can also recruit them in some Greek and maybe even like Bulgarian settlements too. Excuse me. And I like these guys quite a bit. They're very cheap, and their stats aren't great, but for the price, you get, again, that effective against armor. So good stamina. They're experts at hiding in woods. It says they're average, and I would agree, but they can get some kills, and they can fight for a little longer than other units, and they're very cheap. So again, you don't have to feel bad about recruiting them. Total defense of 10 is okay. It's not wonderful. It's not horrible. Attack of 3, charge of 2. They're just a little bit better than these guys. Kind of a direct upgrade. And I like them. I love how they look, and they supported me pretty well in my campaign as support infantry. So my main line would be my spearmen, my marines, my elite units, and then as my second wave that I could throw in wherever I was needing help, I would have a few of these guys. And with the upgrades, you could get experience, swordsman guild. This attack could go up to a 5 or even a 6 or 7, which at that point they're very deadly. And another similar unit that you have access to training as mercenaries, I believe, are the Ghazi infantry. And they're very similar, another axe unit, but slightly better because they have an attack of 6 that is effective against armor. And that's actually pretty powerful. They are a dirt cheap kind of garbage unit, but because of that 6, it means they can really get a lot of kills on much better units. So that I would throw these guys as a unit I don't care about. Just give me kills against heavily armored enemies, and they will do just that. Total defense of 8 means they will die pretty easily, and they're only recruitable in Anatolian regions, but for what they are, they're good. Just don't rely on them as your mainline infantry. Another unit that you have access to, I believe, from your mercenary buildings in Anatolia are Arab auxiliaries, and they're just a sword and shield unit. I don't recruit these guys when I play as the Candarids because I would much rather just get the Candarid Marines, who are better in every regard. But if I have to, if I'm in a tight spot, yeah, I'll pick up a few of these guys. Attack of 5, defense of 15 is okay. It's just very average as the quality says here. They're a little pricier because they are technically a mercenary unit and they're only recruitable in Anatolian regions. But they are a nice option. If you see an Ottoman army, for example, coming down on one of your settlements and you didn't anticipate it and you very quickly just need to boost up the garrison, these guys they'll serve you okay. They're not going to win any awards, but they're not terrible. So next up, we got a few missile units that are also available as mercenaries or area of recruitment. So first we have some Kurdish javelin men, and I probably should have covered these guys when covering the Candarid in the future, but I'll cover them now. They're just another javelin unit, and they are better than the javelin unit you can recruit. So they have slightly better morale than those guys, and they have the good stamina, which is nice. That's expected. These are mountaineers essentially. And melee attack of 2 is not great. Defensive 9 is not great, but an 11 missile attack is very, very nice. And these javelins will definitely get quite a few kills. And the recruitment cost, it says, varies. They're pretty cheap, and they're pretty cheap to maintain as well. But they're only recruitable in several regions in Anatolia, so you're not going to see a lot of these guys, but if you decide to attack the Candarid, you might want to pick up a few of these as mercenaries because they'll serve you well. And next we get to an area of recruitment unit. They're kind of the co-partner of the Yaya spearmen, and these are just your Yaya archers. They are militia peasant archers, and that brings with it everything you would expect. Total offensive 7, not great. Melee attack of 2 is not great. Missile attack of 2 is not great. But they're a peasant militia, they get free upkeep, and they are dirt cheap. So if you need to have a few archers in your armies and you don't want to spend the money, yeah, these guys are for you. And that's about all I have to say about them. A lot of the low tier peasant militia units are very similar despite their names and where you can recruit them. So I don't want to spend too much time on them. Then we get to another unit that I like quite a bit, and that is the Turkmen bowmen. And I believe any faction can recruit these guys in Anatolia, but only in Anatolia. They are an area of recruitment unit, and they're just a very, very good medium archer, I would say. Combat bonus in woods, awesome. Long-range missiles, love that. Can use flaming missiles, great. Good morale, good stamina. For a mercenary unit or area of recruitment unit, that is awesome. Melee attack of 4 is okay. Missile attack of 5 is pretty average. Total defense of 12 is good. But they're also decently cheap, and the fact that they have long-range missiles means they're worth it. And they also get free upkeep in appropriate settlements, I believe. So I typically start off training these archers in my cities as kind of the garrison unit, but as soon as I have access to the Turkmen bowmen, I pick up the Turkmen bowmen because they are a great archer unit. And I also believe, yes, they have this awesome Turkish style of hair that you can see these braids on their back. I love it. It looks really cool. So that's kind of it for now for the infantry and missile units. You definitely have access to others, but that's what I'm going to stick with right now. So let's take a look at the cavalry options. Here we are with the cavalry options for the Candarids, and as you can see, you have a lot of options. Now, I again have split this into kind of your main core units as well as then more area of recruitment and mercenary units. But all that to say, you have access to a lot of units, and they're, for the most part, very good. You have very good light and medium cavalry. So again, you are outclassed by the Ottomans, your neighbors. But if you, for example, are fighting more European-style militaries, you will be able to run circles around them. You might not be able to compete with their heavy cavalry, but because you have such great light and medium cavalry, by using hit-and-run tactics and flanking and whatnot, you will reign supreme on the battlefield. So let's take a look at what we got. Starting off, we have the Hashem retainers, and they are just... they're not a very good cavalry unit, but they do have one awesome aspect to them. So quality average, yes. Good morale, okay, that's actually pretty nice. Attack of 2 is terrible. Total defense of 7 is really terrible. but their charge bonus of 11 means they are worth it. And again, cavalry is so powerful in this game and in this mod. Anytime you see a powerful or a large charge bonus, pick them up, because even though they will die fairly quickly, that charge bonus makes it all worthwhile. For their secondary attack, they have a sword with an attack of 7, which is actually pretty high as well, especially for such a early tier cheap unit. So because they have such a high attack, even though their defense is lacking, I do recruit these guys, and they are great at flanking and running down enemy archers, crossbowmen, things like that. And yeah, I do like these guys. Oh, they are also very cheap. So recruitment cost of 450 for a cavalry unit that can devastate people with a charge, that is definitely worth it. So moving on to your general unit, and I have these guys in kind of a weird order, but whatever. Candar Bodyguard, an amazing bodyguard unit. I really love this bodyguard unit, probably one of my favorites. And most of that is just because they look amazing, especially this armor they have on the horses. Gotta love that. So let's look at their stats. These are the guys that you get with any of your generals. Inspires nearby troops, awesome. Excellent morale, awesome. Powerful charge, awesome. Attack of 3, charge bonus of 11. It's not as high as you might get with more European counterparts, but an 11 charge will still kill most things on the receiving end of that. And then the nice thing is they have a total defense of 30, which is very high, especially for more Eastern factions. 20 armor, very nice. Skill defense skill 6, shield of 4 is very nice. And for their secondary weapon, they have a mace with an attack of 5, and being a mace, that means that it is armor piercing. So they're not only good on the charge, but in the melee, they can really devastate other heavily armored units. So don't be afraid to use these guys. I threw them into the battles many times, and they did not let me down. Just an excellent unit. Speaking of excellent units, another one of your kind of special units that is unique to you are these guys, the Beylik of Candar Lancers. And you can only recruit them in a few settlements. But I don't know. I do really like them. They are an excellent unit. They are elite. Yes, I would agree with that. They're just not quite as powerful as you might expect them. It's so hard to get a hold of them. So I want to say they take... Okay, I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. I got home from work and had to do a bunch of things at home. So now we're here. Okay, backing up. They're a great unit. I mean, let's not kid around here. They are elite. Inspires nearby troops. Excellent morale. Powerful charge. They have that charge bonus of 11. An attack of 5 is very nice. Total defense of 24 is pretty darn good. Their secondary is excellent. It's a sword with an attack of an 11, meaning if once they're in the melee, regardless if they're fighting infantry or cavalry, they will just destroy. And then on top of that, there are 82 men in the unit. So that is more than most other cavalry units. 82 is very nice. They do cost a ton to recruit, but the nice thing is that their upkeep cost is only 422, which, yes, that's still a lot, but it's far less than what the Europeans are paying for their heavy cavalry. A lot of their units are 500, 600, or more, whereas you only have a little over 400 for upkeep. So why did I say what I said earlier about these guys? Basically, it is so hard to get a hold of them. They're a great unit and I want to use them more, but I think in my campaign I only had access to 1 or 2 of these units, and the problem is you can only recruit them in a couple settlements. They take a very high barracks or stable, I can't remember which one, to recruit from. So you have to build up all the right buildings, and then on top of that, it takes 6 turns to recruit them. So I did recruit them because I wanted to try them out, but it just took a long time. And because of that, I prefer other cavalry units. I'm probably being stupid because they are a great unit, but it was just a pain to get a hold of them. But they are an elite unit, so what can you say? Maybe I'm complaining too much. So moving on, let's look at our more missile units, missile cavalry. You start off with an interesting unit, a Javelin Raider unit, and I like these guys. Good morale, good stamina. That's pretty rare for a very low tier early Javelin unit, so I appreciate that. Melee attack of 6 is actually pretty decent. Missile attack of 11, these are Javelins, they're gonna get kills. And total defense of 7 is pretty low, but they do have some armor, they do have some shields, and their job is to really throw these javelins where the enemy does not want them to be thrown. Flank the enemy, throw these into the back of units, and even if those units are heavily armored, these guys will get a lot of kills. And they're pretty cheap, they're pretty fast. I like this unit. I definitely recommend them. They will die fairly easily, so watch out for that. But other than that, they do a great job. And now we get to your horse archers, and the Candarids have some incredible horse archers. Your lowest tier are these guys, and even them, they're very good. Good stamina, good morale. They can form the shooting circle. All of that is good. Yeah, you can recruit them anywhere with the appropriate buildings. Missile attack of 5, that's pretty standard. Melee attack of 7, though, that's very good. Defense of 10 is I would say that's probably about average for early tier horse archers. But yeah, they're good. For an early tier horse archer, they're very good, and they're decently cheap as well. Their design is awesome. I love these round shields on their back. I love these quivers on their thighs. Just a really nice unit. I didn't use these guys as much as you might think, and that's not because I don't like them. I do like them, but it's just because your other horse archers are also so good and much better. So, like their infantry archer counterpart, the No-Care Retainers are incredible. An excellent horse archer unit. They can form the shooting circle, long-range missiles, which for a horse archer unit is pretty rare. And unfortunately, I got a family member who's calling me, and I will be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Let's get right back into this. This is a couple days later, actually, so I had to re-upload or reorganize my army, and I believe I got all the units we had left, but let's jump into this real quick. So I think we left off somewhere around here with the Askari horse archers, and this is a great horse archer unit that is available to you as one of your feudal units, there we go. And they're just a superior horse archer unit. Very solid indeed. So if we look at the stats, excellent morale, awesome. Long range missiles, love that. They can form the shooting circle. Melee attack of 7 is pretty good for a horse archer. Missile attack of 5, that's pretty standard. But since it is a long range missile, that makes it so worthwhile. A charge bonus of 5 means that with a melee attack of 7 and that 5, they can actually do some damage with the charge, especially when flanking. And that's one of my favorite tactics with horse archers is make the enemy think you're just using them as missile troops, but then use them to be surprise ambushers, if you will. And these guys excel at that job. And as far as defense, total defense is 15, which is decent. It's pretty good. 11 of that is armor. That's very good. Shield of 4, that's pretty average. Defense skill of 0, and I don't entirely understand that because these are professional soldiers, so logically it doesn't make sense, but I do know that the modders have kind of a system where they decide what the defense points are, how they're allocated. So I won't question it, but 15 is pretty good for horse archers. It's not the best, but definitely decent. And yeah, these are a great unit. The other thing that's really nice about them is, well, they do get free upkeep as they are a feudal unit, so if you have the correct buildings, free upkeep, that's nice. But if you don't have them with free upkeep, it's not half bad because their upkeep is only, I believe, 3, I didn't write it down. Oh no, there it is, 375, which is really cheap for an elite horse unit. So That's great. These guys are a really nice unit to have. I definitely used a few of them in my campaign, which we'll see a little bit later. But yeah, they look great, they perform great. Definitely train these guys. And then moving on, I wanted to cover just a few kind of area of recruitment units that are available to you, and some mercenary units as well. Obviously, there are far more available than just these five, but these were the five most prevalent units that I trained in my campaign when it came to cavalry, so let's take a look at them. First off, we have the Faris Lancers. I believe you start with one or two of these guys in your campaign, and they're just a very... It says average, but I would say they're a solid medium cavalry unit because cavalry is so powerful, and with that charge bonus of 11, they'll do damage no matter what. That's just how the game works. Excellent morale, powerful charge, both of those are really nice things. Attack of 2, that doesn't really matter because that refers to the spear, and obviously what you really care about with their primary attack is the charge bonus, and 11 is definitely good. As for their secondary weapon, I have it here, they have swords which have an attack of 7, so pretty good there. Nothing too spectacular, but nothing weak. And then a total offense of 15 is pretty good for medium cavalry, so it says average, but I would say they're definitely above average. They might suffer in the later game just because their armor can't compare, but as a medium cavalry unit, they're very good. They are an area of recruitment unit. There we go. So you can only recruit them in Anatolian or Byzantine regions, but I definitely like these guys. I recruited quite a few of them in my campaign, and I believe they're fairly cheap to upkeep as well, although I didn't write down the upkeep cost, so sorry about that. But yeah, definitely like these guys. And then moving on to another unit I quite like, and that is the Turkmen Lancers. And first of all, their design is spectacular. I want to point one thing out, and that is they have this quiver on their back with their bow slung as well, which just kind of shows how so many of these Turkish horsemen excelled both at as being horse archers as well as being melee cavalry. And that little element of design really kind of hints at that, which I appreciate quite a bit. So the first thing you'll notice is there are 82 of these guys in a unit as opposed to 50 or 60. So that's just automatically puts them kind of a tier up. Excellent morale, awesome. Powerful charge, great. Good stamina, excellent. Attack of 4, charge bonus of 11. 11 is pretty standard, but that doesn't mean it's bad. That means it's still a charge bonus. So very powerful. And then total defense is 17, and that is quite solid indeed. So they are an area of recruitment unit, only in Anatolian regions, but definitely get these guys whenever you can. They'll perform really well. And as their secondary weapon, they also have a sword with an attack of 7, which means that they'll do pretty well in the melee. So there's really no downside to these guys other than area of recruitment. Also, one thing I want to point out is that their upkeep is extremely low, so only 246, which 246 for 82 great horsemen is kind of unheard of. It won't hurt you at all to train these guys, so I definitely recommend that. And I also recommend picking up these guys. So whenever, it's kind of a rule of thumb for me, whenever this mercenary unit is available, regardless of what faction I'm playing, I hire them because they give you so much bang for your buck. So let's look. Excellent morale, powerful charge, good stamina. All of that is really good. Attack of 3 doesn't really matter because of that charge bonus of 11. So that kind of matches up with what we've been seeing. It's just a kind of a standard charge, but doesn't matter. Charge bonus is good. It's really good. It's one of the most powerful parts of this game. And total defense of 19 is very good. So they're kind of an elite. They're I would say right on the border of medium cavalry and heavy cavalry because their horses are not armored. Not that that really matters in this mod or game, I should say, but they're also quick. So they're quicker than a lot of heavier cavalry, and they can still pack a serious punch. Area of... Oh, wait a minute. Maybe this is a mercenary unit. It doesn't say area of recruitment down here. So I would have to check. I know you can get them up in the steppe in like the Crimean Khanate lands and across Russia, but I believe you might be able to pick up a few of them in Anatolia as well. I don't remember exactly. I'd have to look in the game files, but these guys are amazing. And then, if I can find my notes, the last great thing about them is, well, two last great things, is their secondary weapon is a mace, or which means that it is armor piercing. So it only has an attack of 4, but because of that armor piercing, it gives them a huge leg up when attacking heavier armored cavalry, infantry. That mace can really deal some damage. And then if that's not enough, if I haven't sold you on them yet, their upkeep is only 242, which again, similar to these guys, it's just really cheap for great cavalry units. So it's true, you may not be able to best the Turkish, or I should say the Ottoman cavalry, or the Hungarian cavalry, or the Crimean Khanate cavalry. However, because you have access to so many cavalry units and they're cheap, you can outnumber them. And not only do you outnumber them, but your cavalry are still great units, and that's kind of a really nice playstyle element to this faction. And then just 2 more units I wanted to take a look at are horse archer units, and I prefer, with horse archers, with my campaign, I preferred hiring these guys because of, well, their performance is excellent, but also, if you'll notice, they have a traditional cavalry formation here, whereas these horse archers are more scattered. And there's pros and cons to both. I'll put them next to each other so you can kind of see. The pro to having them sort of scattered like this is they dodge missile fire a little bit better, so it's harder for missiles to hit them, but the major con is their charge into enemy units is not as devastating, just because there's a lot of spaces in between them and whatnot. So it kind of depends what your playstyle is. If you like using horse archers as nothing but horse archers, then you might like these more scattered units. But as I said earlier, when I use horse archers, I like to use them as both archers and a melee cavalry option should I need it. So I prefer having these formations with my horse archers, but again, it's totally up to you. And I do like these guys. I hired a few of them. They're kind of a cheap last minute option if you need more missile fire. So let's take a look. First of all, 80 soldiers in a unit. Again, that is more than average, so very nice. Good stamina, awesome. Can form shooting circle, standard. Quality, average. I would say, yeah. They do have a good attack for being a cheap mercenary or area of recruitment unit. So melee attack of 5, charge of 5, that's fine. Missile attack of 4, pretty average. It's not long range, so that does hurt them a little bit. But where they really suffer is their defense. A total defense of 4 is pretty terrible. That's kind of like peasant tier defense, and 2 of that is defense skill, meaning that if archers or any sort of missile fire is aimed at these guys, they only have a 2 defense because defense skill doesn't matter. And I believe if you're firing gunpowder units at these guys, so musketmen or whatnot, that defies the shield stat too, meaning these guys would have a 0 defense if they were up against gunners. I mean, gunners are they're gonna shoot through anything, but yeah, these guys will die pretty fast if they are against any sort of missile unit or melee unit for that matter. So definitely watch out for that. But because they're cheap, they're a good unit just to pick up as kind of a support unit, or if you desperately need more archers, yeah, you don't think twice about hiring these guys. Definitely pick them up. But if you can, I would much rather recommend their older brothers, if you will, the Turkmen medium cavalry, and these guys are just another great horse archer unit. You can instantly tell by their design that they are professional warriors, and they're ready for the fight. So 82 units, or 82 soldiers in a unit. That's great. It's above average. Good morale, good stamina. That's really nice. A lot of times horse archers don't have that good morale. They can break pretty easily. So having good morale for horse archers is always much appreciated. I believe their area of recruitment unit, I believe both of these guys are, yeah, so Anatolian regions. But that's totally fine. They're well worth it. I would happily ship them anywhere outside of Anatolia just to use them. Melee attack of 6 is very nice. Missile attack of 5, pretty standard. Charge bonus of 6, that's pretty good. So a 12 attack if you can charge them into the enemy. Total defense of 14, very solid. So yes, overall just a much superior unit to the Turkmen tribal horsemen. But horse archers are horse archers. They're pretty much valuable no matter what, especially if you enjoy that playstyle. If you have the patience, horse archers can pretty much just rule the world fairly easily. I typically enjoy faster paced battles, so I do love my horse archers, but I generally prefer foot archers. But again, it kind of just depends how I'm feeling, what faction I'm playing, and of course what your playstyle is as well. So with that said, let's just jump into my most recent Candarid campaign to see how that went. Okay, so here we are on the campaign map. You can see that it is turn 55, year 1461, and I have essentially won the game. And the reason why I say that is I thought I had won the game. So I have, if we look at the regions controlled, I have the 30 regions I need for the victory conditions, and I thought that I had all the appropriate settlements too. And so what I did for my last 2 settlements is I backstabbed my allies, the Crimean Khanate, and I took their last 2 settlements. So you can see that this is where my main army is. Here is my faction leader, which I was talking about earlier, and you can see that he is just an incredible military commander. So he has been the main arm of my military campaign, and here, although depleted, I had to take on, I think, 3 stacks of Crimean armies. It was quite a battle, but this was one of my elite armies. You can see I've got the infantry, I've got missile units, I picked up monster bombard mercenary, I've got gunners and archers, a very nice army. It's kind of sad to see it so depleted, but I have a couple reinforcements over here, including my favorite Candarid Marines, love those guys, and then over here as well I have a couple garbage units over here, but then a nice medium tier army to come and reinforce. But I didn't think I would need it because I thought this was going to win me the game. And I took my 30th region and I was thinking, wait, why haven't I won the game? And then I went through each of the regions and I realized I did not control this last region of Konya. So Konya is down here and it is controlled by the Cameronids. It is their capital. And they've been my ally throughout the whole game, and I realized that I needed to take that settlement to win, and I stopped the game because it's not worth it to me. It's unfortunate, but I don't have any military forces over here. It's just not worth the time, which is sad because I had already spent so much time building my celebratory victory fleet here in the Black Sea. And I spent way too much time on that and way too much money, but there it is as a victory that I will not achieve. But I basically have, because I have the 30 regions. So let's talk about how I played my campaign. Basically, I decided I wanted to control the entire Black Sea. I wanted every territory that connected to it, and then I would use the Black Sea as kind of my highway to transport reinforcements and armies and whatnot. And so that was my goal. The first thing I did is I attacked the Ottomans as fast as I could. I knew that I needed to hold Angora for the victory conditions, and so I grouped up all my armies and I attacked Angora right away. Now, it was tough and it was cutting it close because there were several Ottoman armies that were just one turn away. I got very lucky, but I took it. And then, meanwhile, I'd been sending a diplomat to the Ottomans, and I sued for peace. And because of how the Ottoman AI works, which I talked about earlier, they accepted, and they actually gave me the city of Bolu in return. And then I thought, you know what, let's just make an alliance with the Ottomans. So I allied with the Ottomans probably by turn 6 or 7, and we have been allies ever since. And so they don't really know what to do with that. They have some full stack armies that have just kind of been floating around, but they haven't attacked me yet. So I'm pretty content with that. So now that I had a nice little foothold in central Anatolia, I decided to take out the Genoese. So I destroyed their colony here at Amastra, and then I crossed... Actually, no, that's not true. So I took Amastra, that is true, but then I decided to go attack Constantinople. So I took my armies and I sailed over here. It was before 1453, so the Ottoman armies hadn't yet spawned to take Constantinople. There we go. So I took the city and as well as the Genoese colony here, which is a really good move because not only is this a very rich area, but it also gives you access to your best units. So you can see here in Constantinople, I can train my best horse archers, my gunners, my Nafatoon, as well as some good catapults, which is nice. Even though gunpowder does reign supreme, sometimes I do like to play around with the mangonel. And then here in Karakai, I can recruit all of my best units. So my infantry, some more Nafatoon, everything. So I did that, and that was probably the best move I made at that point. I made Constantinople my capital. The only thing I would say about that is if you do have the historical scripts enabled, the Ottomans will spawn a massive army in 1453, and they will lay siege to Constantinople regardless of who holds it. So they attacked me, they backstabbed me, and thankfully, the way the script works is I didn't have to fight the battle. I was able to retreat, and the Ottomans were now my enemy, but because of the Ottoman AI, all I did was the next turn I sent a diplomat to them, reestablished my alliance, and made them pay me a bunch of money. So that worked out well. And then I just built up my economy, I built up my technology, and... Oh my gosh, my cats have interrupted me like 4 times while trying to record. Anyway, I have no idea where I left off, so let's just jump back into this, I guess. Once I had Constantinople, I built up my economy, that's right, and that's where I was. And then since I had a strong economy, I mean, you don't see it now because I spent so much money on these boats, but I basically just kept buying settlements from the Ottomans. So all down the northern Anatolian coast, they would not sell Bursa to me. I really wanted it. They wouldn't give it to me. But I do have all of Gallipoli now, into Thrace a little bit, and then up the Bulgarian coast all the way to the Danube. So I bought all of these regions. And at the same time, I sent my armies north and I took the Crimean Peninsula. Now, I was allies with the Crimean Khanate, so I only took Kaffa and Mengup. That's not what it was called, but that's what it's called now. The names of the cities change depending on what faction, what culture controls them, which is yet another great part of this mod. So I was expanding into Crimea militarily while I was expanding along the coast in Bulgaria economically. This made me run into a couple different factions. My allies, the Ottomans, were attacked by the Wallachians, So they and I both invaded Wallachia, which is nice. I was able to use the Danube as kind of a highway that connected to the Black Sea to easily bring reinforcements here. I took a few settlements from the Wallachians here, and then over here. I don't have many good soldiers here, just enough to kind of maintain the borders. But after the Ottomans pushed up north, the Wallachians only had 2 settlements left, and I was able to make them my protectorate. Which, what that does, the main thing is it counts their settlements as yours for your victory conditions. So I don't actually control 30 settlements, but the Wallachians count towards that since they are my protectorate. Meanwhile, I was expanding up here. I went to war with the Moldovians, and likewise, they were being hammered. They are still being hammered by the Polish from the north, so I pushed a little bit. I have a kind of a terrible force here, but it would be okay. Another great general. Wow, it actually, I take that back. He's not a great general, but he has been with me right from the beginning of the game. You can see from his experience. But I've forced the Moldovians to also be my protectorates. So I should say vassals. That's more accurate. I have 2 vassals, which it's nice. It's kind of rare for Medieval 2 for the AI to accept that, but I think they were just in such bad positions that they finally did that. And that was pretty much it. By this point, I had kicked the Genoese out of Asia and Russia, and I had moved up the coast, and the only people left was the Crimean Khanate for me to finish the goal of controlling all the Black Sea. And the Crimean Khanate had been my allies since the beginning of my game. They had been loyal allies, but I wanted to control the Black Sea, so I backstabbed them, like I said earlier, and in kind of a lightning campaign, I kicked them out. They still have 1 or 2 regions up here, but they're not too much of an issue. And that's pretty much it. It was kind of a quick campaign, only 55 turns. Once I got my economy rolling, things went by pretty quickly. The biggest issue for me was recruitment centers. If we look at Sinope here, my capital, I still haven't built it up enough to build my best units. And that's probably, that's my fault, because here you can see just 1 more barracks would give me the best units, but I was focused elsewhere, and money was a little tight at first because I was buying so many settlements from the Ottomans, but moving over here was really a good choice by me, because I was able to just have great recruitment centers that were pretty much already built up, so that was nice. As far as diplomacy now, it's pretty much the end of the game. I've united the Islamic powers besides the Crimean Khanate, which I'm going to take out, but I think I'm pretty much done. I don't think I'll finish it. I just need 1 more settlement, but in my mind, I've won. Oh, I should say, if we look at my merchant trade, a few of my merchants died, but 3,500 is how much I'm making from merchants. So I decided to do the easy thing and just throw them on the carpets down here because it's so close to where I was training them. And they're making a little bit of money. There's definitely better resources to use because I'm here in Anatolia, and typically the farther away the resources are from your capital, the more money they will give you. So I should have moved them over here into Europe, but whatever, it worked out well. So that's about it, and I will leave the screen here on my beautiful Candarid armada. So next time, it's probably going to be a little while until my next video, unfortunately. The way I look at this mod is there are 3 superpowers at the beginning of the game. So if we do this, well, this is not the beginning of the game anymore, but the 3 superpowers are obviously the Ottomans. They are the most powerful faction, pretty much from turn 1 to the end, essentially. Even if you're doing well, you can see right now I have a really nice empire. The Ottomans are still way more powerful than me. So they are superpower number 1. Superpower number 2 is the Venetians. They have 18 settlements, I believe, an incredible military and incredible economy. And then closely behind them are the Hungarians as the 3rd superpower. Oh yeah, I forgot. I called I called the jihad on Buddha just because I wanted to see what would happen. It was kind of a experiment, a social experiment, if you will. Anyway, so of those three superpowers, I have not covered any of them yet. The reason for that is I don't typically enjoy playing Medieval 2 as starting as a superpower. I much prefer starting as a smaller faction and then building up. But I have recently started a superpower campaign, and I'm not going to tell you which one it was. It was one of those three. It's just taking a very long time. Because you have so many territories and so many armies, each turn takes quite a while. So it will be a while. I'm also working overtime at my job and trying to get the podcast out too, so I'm a little swamped, but hopefully next time I will cover one of the three superpowers. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.